Due to the rise of 3D home consoles, many classic video game franchises took the leap from 2D to 3D. While Konami took this leap as well with their hit franchise Castlevania on the N64, they decided to take a different approach with their PS1 title Symphony of the Night. Opting for more familiar 2D sprites instead of 3D models, one might wonder how different Symphony of the Night would have looked like had it taken the route of 3D. Yo, it's Grego, and in this spooky video, I take Symphony of the Night's main character Alucard and remake him in a low poly PS1 style, meaning that I'll be sticking with a low poly count and texture resolution. Now before I get into the video, I do want to add one quick disclaimer that this is not me saying Symphony of the Night would have been any better had it been 3D rather than 2D. It's legitimately one of my favorite games of all time, and part of it is due to the beautiful visuals and gameplay I personally don't think would have worked in 3D. I just thought this would be a fun experiment considering my modeling style. Alright, now with that out of the way. Throughout the whole modeling process, I was using this illustration of Alucard by the game's concept artist Ayami Kojima as reference. For the mesh, you're actually seeing my first attempt at making the model. I was kind of rushing things and was completely ignoring the poly count limit I had set for myself. I had even gone as far as to texture the head and some of the hair. But after some days away from the model, I decided to completely start over, starting with just the body. Not much to talk about in terms of the mesh. Also, my power went out during the recording, so the footage got corrupted. Just your basic, low poly, no limbs connected, blocky hands, pointy feet looking ass. The real fun, as always, is with the texture. And props to Ayami Kojima's amazing illustrations, which made shading and choosing the colors a lot easier. I made individual textures for the model, each ranging from 16 to 64 pixels for the dimensions. I used a monochrome color palette for most of Alucard's outfit, with some tones of yellow for the gold trim and the collar. To give my textures a more painted look, I used a little cheat code called manually applying anti-aliasing, pretty much taking the hard corners and smoothing them out by lowering the opacity of the color, first by 50%, then by 25%. Like I brought up beforehand, I had already started texturing the head on my first attempt at making this model. Once I was done texturing the body on my second attempt, I decided to keep the work I had already done with a few modifications. For the face, I used this color palette using white as the highlight and a subtle green-yellowish tint for the shadows. I tried adding Alucard's bright yellow pupils as well, but I couldn't muster up a look that I felt did the character justice. And in my opinion, the blank white eyes I feel give him a more supernatural and mysterious presence, much like the one that he gives off in the game. Also, this isn't to pile on more excuses, but honestly I didn't even notice that he had pupils when looking at his in-game portrait. For the hair, I completely scrapped the initial attempt, with the first being 3 different textures, one being the crown and the other 2 being separate strands. This method, although seemed to work well, at closer inspection would show some notable seams. On my second attempt, I stuck to one texture, with the top representing the crown and the strands flowing down and parting. And with some clever UV mapping, I was able to cover the model's hair with just one 64 by 64 texture. One last thing I want to bring up, before packing the textures and rigging the model, you'll notice some textures rely on transparency. Getting this to render in Eevee, Blender's rendering engine since 2.8, is not as simple as one might think. Normally what I do to get a shadeless result on my models is I just remove the shader altogether and pass the texture as the material surface output. Unfortunately, it's not as simple for transparency, and I couldn't find a goddamn straight answer in all the Reddit threads I've seen, so here's how I achieve this. We have an image texture node with our transparent texture and a subtract node with the first parameter as 1 and the second as the texture's alpha. Pass the subtract node's output to a transparent BSDF. We add another image texture node and pass that and the transparent BSDF's output to an add shader node. Finally, we pass that output to our material's surface output. You'll also need to change the blend mode to either alpha blend or alpha clip. How do you know which one? I don't fucking know. I'm not even 100% sure if all these nodes are even necessary to do this, but hey, it works, so I'm not complaining. Now before I show the final results of my model, I'd like to thank my patrons on Patreon. Thank you, Bjorn. Thanks Bjorn for becoming a low poly patron on Patreon and supporting this channel as well as my art. If you'd like to gain access to the models I make on this channel like Bjorn, then subscribe to my low poly tier for the low price of $5 a month. Or if you just want to support my channel, I also have a $1 tier where you'll get my thanks and appreciation each video. Alright, that's enough selling out. Now I present to you how Alucard would have looked like had Symphony of the Night been in 3D. Ooh.
Thank you. Farewell.
Well, that's all for this video. Leave a like if you learned something, and comment down below if there are any titles that you'd like to see get the same treatment. Thanks for watching.